Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Andrew Webb for sending in some awesome pictures of his Krieg 65th Siege Regiment and 17th Armoured Regiment. Absolutely love the colour scheme on these guys. Reminds me of sort of World War One, World War Two German colour scheme. Kind of reminds me of the colour scheme that the World War One German soldiers used to have on their helmets. Anyway, either way, Andrew, absolutely fantastic models. Thank you for sending these pictures in. Been getting a lot of Krieg pictures recently, and you know what? I love it. Please send me in more Krieg pictures. Always happy to see them. If anyone else wants to send me any cool pictures, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. But I also know that lots and lots of people don't like using Facebook anymore. So if you want to email them to me, you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. I will be totally honest, I only check the Morning Glory email probably once or twice a week. So if you put it on the Facebook page, it's more likely to get used quicker, but I will still use it if it gets sent to the Gmail. Anyway, I'm waffling on around that kind of stuff. Let's get into today's video. So today, guys, I want to do a video, and I don't know what I'm going to call the title, but it'll be something along the lines of, so you're thinking of getting into Pure Infantry Guard. Okay, now I know some of you will roll your eyes and go, oh, Mordian Glory, you're talking about Pure Infantry Guard again. You know, and some of you will start reeing on the ground and whatnot. And all I can say is that I know I have talked about Pure Infantry before, guys, and some of you who have been following the channel for a long time will definitely be like, well, I've already heard all he's got to say about this, so I'm going to leave. Well, I hope you don't leave, because that would make me very sad. But the reason I am talking about it again is for like 2 or 3 reasons. The first one is that I think that Pure Infantry Guard is going to become the more competitive choice for Guard as time goes on in 9th edition. I think the advantages of Pure Infantry Guard, whilst there in previous editions, are really forefront in 9th edition, the way the missions play. And last but not least, there are, with the new edition comes lots of new players into the game, and I bang on about Pure Infantry. It's probably been a year or 2 since I did the last, Horde Army 101 video. I think was the last time I did it, and I didn't just talk about Guard, I talked about Horde Armies in general in there. And I think with newer players, it's, you don't want to go back and watch an 8th edition video when we've got 9th edition now, right? I mean, even if the things translate, you don't want to do that. So this is going to be an up-to-date version, and 40k especially now is like a living rule set. And so with all the changes that happen, I sometimes have videos that I put up and a month later they're no longer relevant because the meta's shifted in some way, which is annoying because it means I have to redo the videos, but it's also good because it means there's plenty of content for me to produce for you guys. But I want to talk about Pure Infantry. You're thinking about getting into Pure Infantry, and I want to talk about it specifically in the context of 9th edition. Okay, so we'll cover some basics, and then we'll say why that works really well in 9th edition. It's also going to be a bit of like, make sure you know what you're getting into. Make sure it's not it might seem like a simple decision, just paint loads of guardsmen, but it is very slightly more than that. It is pretty much that, but it's slightly more than that. It is a big decision to commit to the Pure Infantry lifestyle. A lot of people, they get burnt out halfway through. So I guess that would be the first thing to talk about, which is it's a lot of time and effort. Unless you pay a commissioned painter to do it, it takes a relatively long time to build up a Pure Infantry army. If you're going to do it, you are committing to something. So first things first, before we even talk about tactics, let's talk about real life, because unfortunately we all live in real life. I know we wish we didn't, but we all unfortunately are stuck to this mortal coil. And yeah, it's a lot of models. And let's assume that you're really into it and you really want to build this army. You want to make it yours, and yes, you want to be competitive at the same time. These are your dudes. Unless you literally go for a 3-colour minimum tabletop standard paint scheme, it will take a relatively long time to build the army up. It'll probably take you between 3 to 6 months if you really, really hammer it. And that's if you're really, using like contrast paints and stuff. So my first thing would be, make sure you know what you're getting into. Second thing would be, take advantage of time-saving stuff. Okay? Contrast paints are fantastic. Totally honest, I've been doing my Great Morning Restoration project for 18 months now. I love the colour scheme, but I have made my life very difficult for myself. And I've been playing around with a bit of contrast paint in the background recently, and contrast paint came out at the same time as the Mordian restoration project, and I just wish that I had maybe gone a bit further into contrast paint, because I could have saved myself a lot of time. But so that's the first thing. If you're thinking about it just from the real life and the hobbying side of things, pick a color scheme. I recommend using things like contrast paint, using snap fit Cadians. That would be my recommendation. So that's sort of just looking at the brief real life kind of things. But we're not here for real life. Screw real life. We're here for the tactics. So first tactical in-game thing you're going to have to be aware of. You are not going to have a turn where you blast the whole enemy off the field. This is a slow burn. Okay? You will be grinding your opponent down turn after turn. I see many comments of people going, I've tried pure infantry and it just feels like I don't do anything. It's like, no, you don't do anything on one turn. You do things over the whole course of the game. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. You grind the enemy down. That's how it works. Unless you're facing another horde army, like if someone runs like a bug swarm at you or an orc green tide, then you're probably going to absolutely obliterate them because you have a lot of firepower. So first things first, the army plays differently to traditional competitive armies. Traditionally, competitive armies were all about blasting the enemy with as much damage. But what have we seen in 9th edition do well time and time again? Durability. The ability to take, forced concentration used to be the most important thing, where you occupy a small part of the board and blast it out from that. Now it's all about force width, about combat width. And forced concentration is still very good, but horde armies, and the way 9th edition missions play, it's less about the big swing, slam dunk, one-hit KO. It's more about grinding the enemy down, holding on to those objectives for as long as possible, and scoring as many points. You can go a whole game without killing anything and still win. That's an extreme example though. Typically what you want to do is enough damage to start whittling your opponent's firepower away so that he can't just sweep your horde away over 2 or 3 turns. Okay? But by and large, you are playing the objective game. Okay? That's how horde armies, how pure infantry guard has always worked. You play the objective game. You grind the enemy down. It's less about the amount of damage you're doing. Okay? And what is 9th edition all about? It's about playing the objective game. So that's why I have had more success with my pure infantry guard army than any other army that I have used in 9th edition so far. Okay? So, straight up, that's why I think these guys work, because it's all about, and I'm doing nothing different than what I would normally do over all the editions I've been playing since 6th edition, where I came up with this mad sleigh ride of collecting pure infantry guard. Okay? So first, that's the first thing to note. The army does not do a slam dunk. The army wins the long game. Okay? So the second thing I want to talk about when we're talking about horde armies, talking about competitive guard, is, and this might sound like an obvious point, so we've talked about how the army plays, and you've got to switch your mindset from other 40k traditional sort of competitive armies and switch to this new, I don't really care too much about how much damage I'm doing as long as I'm doing a bit every turn. Second thing we're going to talk about, and it seems like a really obvious point, but it is, you need a lot of dudes. Okay, I have come across many battle reports online. I have come across many comments in many threads of many forums and many videos of people either saying, how many infantry do I need? Or saying, oh, I've got a pretty good horde of infantry. I've got 60 guys now. No. Okay. A standard combined arms Imperial Guard army should be running a minimum of 100 infantry. That's a army that also includes vehicles. Okay, your standard mix of guards, vehicles and infantry army, you should be running a minimum of 100 infantry. Okay? A pure infantry army, as a minimum, you want to double that figure. Okay? You want 200 infantry on the board as a minimum. Okay? Even in 9th edition, even with the detachment restrictions, even with the increase in the points of guardsmen, you want to be putting 200 bodies down on the field. Okay, now not all of those will be line infantry, and we'll talk about what line infantry is in a second. That is the total number of bodies, including officers and heavy weapon teams and other support elements. So, but of those minimum 200, you really want to be turning up to the battlefield with a minimum of between 120, a minimum of 120, a recommendation of 150 line infantry. Now, what is line infantry? For me, it is essentially infantry squads, conscripts, and veterans. Anything that is a 10-man squad or greater. Anything else? Heavy weapon teams, special weapon teams, command squads, officers, commissars, etc. That falls under what I call support elements. Okay, line infantry. It's having 200 guys, but only having 100 line infantry isn't going to work. You've got too many support elements there. Line infantry, then, number one focus is, they do everything in your army, to be honest. But the thing about line infantry is they're the guys that are going to be taking the ground and taking the casualties. Okay, and you're going to be taking a lot of casualties, and they're the ones that have the best, I'd say, wound per point efficiency. The problem with things like support elements is you often get more firepower, but you get less wounds, and that's not the name of the game in this army. The name of the game in this army is to outlast the enemy. So you need more wounds per firepower, more wounds per point rather than firepower per point. Okay, and you don't really want to be in a situation where you're having to take objectives in the midfield with things like heavy weapon teams or command squads. You want those guys doing the damage. You want those guys doing the outflanking or sitting back and doing the fire support role. It's the infantry, the line infantry, that you want to be taking ground with. Okay, so that is the number one purpose of your line infantry, is to take ground, take casualties, and your support elements, the ones that can help boost your firepower a little bit. But again, the vast majority of your damage is probably going to be coming from your line infantry. So we've talked about line infantry. Let's talk about the second aspect, support elements. Okay, you need both. A lot of people think when I say pure infantry, oh, let's turn up to the field of battle with 300 conscripts. No. Okay, 300 conscripts, unsupported, won't get you anywhere. Okay, you'll do well maybe for a couple of turns at some point in the game, but either you won't have the firepower to break out of someone trying to hem you into your deployment zone, or you won't have the firepower to reduce the enemy's firepower so they can't whittle through your whole horde. Okay, so you do need a healthy balance of support elements and line infantry. I would probably say out of 200 infantry that you're turning up with, like I said, you want at least 120, but you also want, I'd say, a minimum, really you want 150 of those boys to be line infantry and the remaining 50 guys to be your support elements. So again, you things like your heavy weapon teams, your command squads, your special weapon teams, and your officers, and you see things like rattling snipers. All these other options that we have, you want that you want those to make up about 25 to 33% of the infantry bodies you're putting onto the field of battle. Okay. Now, I'm not going into specifics about loadouts or anything like that. We're just talking about general concepts, general ways you want to be running your pure infantry army. Okay, so that is how the army operates. That is the number of dudes you want to be, just conceiving in your head. We've talked about what the different elements of those troops are, line infantry and your support elements. Now we want to talk about the next stage in the video. So this leads on from support elements. What I want to talk about next is coordinating the mass. Okay, so having a large mass of bodies is good. It's a good start, but you need to be able to coordinate them, and that means you need officers. In your pure infantry army, orders and officers are the most important support element you can have. You don't want to be losing any of them, not a single one. If you lose it, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but your aim will be to keep your command structure alive. Now, that's not just for fluff purposes. Infantry without orders do not do very much. They don't move very fast. They don't put out much firepower. They don't have much tactical flexibility. You really need your officers. So a minimum that you should be turning up with is 3 company commanders and 3 platoon commanders. You might think, that's all the officers I can take. Nope. You want to be, if you're taking Catachans or Cadians, you want to be thinking about Creed. You want to be thinking about Kel. He gets you an extra order. You want to be thinking about Strachan. Okay? If you are not running a specialist, a regiment that gets special characters, your warlord trait, you want to take Master of Command. I know a lot of people consider the Master of Command trait not very good. Those people aren't running pure infantry guard armies. You need that extra order. You should be using the stratagem Inspired Tactics every single turn. Okay? If you're not, something's gone wrong. Okay? You want to be using that every single turn. Orders are really, really important. I notice when I don't have enough orders, if I lose characters, or I am running an army that doesn't have a lot of officers, if I'm trying something different, I notice just how ineffective my infantry is. And when my infantry is ineffective, even if I'm running a hybrid force, my army is ineffective. But yeah, you really, really need orders. Now you have to be careful because you don't. 3 company commanders, 3 platoon commanders, Creed and Kel, that could be a lot of points in going into your officers. But if they're the only officers you're taking, and you don't load up on things like priests and commissars, then I think that's a good thing, and I think you should do that. Creed gets you an additional, I believe, 3 orders, and then Kel lets you get an additional order on top of that. So, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't looked at the old Creed data sheet in a while myself because I run Mordians, but that is additional 4 orders. So you're looking at 6 from the company commanders, 3 from platoon commanders, that's 9 in total, plus 1 from Inspired Tactics, that's 10, plus the ones from Creed, that is 14 orders. And don't forget, if you're Cajun, you could take something like Master of Command as a warlord and get 15, or you could look at Creed and take Superior Tactical Training, where he will then allow you to potentially get even more orders there. I think Cadians are really strong on the order front. I don't like the fact they have to stay still to get a lot of their bonuses, but that's less of a problem for sort of turn 2, turn 3 onwards when you've already secured the middle of the board, but we'll get into that in a minute. So, yes, orders. Just want to say you need them. You need them in your Pro Infantry Guard army. If you don't take them, you're not having a good time. Okay, you won't achieve very much. They are essential. Other characters, like commissars, they're okay. They're nice to have. The way morale has changed in 9th edition means that it's not as bad as it once was. Priests, I think, are very important, but not essential. I think if you can afford them, you should take them, simply because they help you to act in every phase of the game, and that's what you want to be doing, because a priest plus 30 guardsmen will put out enough attacks to give you a decent counter charge force. We're playing a close quarters game these days, guys, with with the closer boards. Even if it's a closer range firefight, or people are getting into combat with us quicker, some of the new Blood Angel stuff is looking pretty crazy. You want to definitely be considering priests, but the number one thing to take away from this is orders. Orders mean if you do get into combat, you can fall back and still fight because of get back in the fight. Orders mean that when you're getting up close and trying to win those close range firefights, you can use first rank fire, second rank fire to pour on the firepower. Orders mean that you can reroll ones to hit with all those plasma guns, which you should be taking a plasma gun in every infantry squad, okay? Because they're really, really good. Or melter, but really plasma, okay? Orders are life. You want as many orders as you can get your hands on, okay? So that's sort of the third part of the video. There's a couple more bits I want to cover. So the last sort of main serious point that I want to talk about in today's video, I've got one more point after this, but the last main serious point that I want to talk about is deployment and the way you move this thing around on the battlefield, right? Okay, so one of the big problems that I see people who's tried to get into this format when they're first getting into it, with deployment, they tend to find themselves getting traffic jammed, and they tend to find themselves struggling to get up the board as quickly or as efficiently as they want to. So the way you fix that is in the deployment. I tend to deploy, and I have done this for half a decade now at least. Well, probably coming up to a decade. So I've been doing this since I got onto this mad sleigh ride of pure infantry. My tactical deployment is called the three line deployment, where I deploy my forces in 3 lines. I have the first line is line infantry, expendable. I mean, everyone's expendable, but these are the guys that you expect to die. They're going to be the first ones to die. Traditionally, that was made up of conscripts. Conscripts have fallen out of favour a little bit now, but I think are coming back in a big way. Even with all the problems, they're still coming back in a big way. So conscripts, you don't mind them dying. They're expendable. They're going to take the charge. Yeah, no worries about that. The second line, it wants to be made up of your regulars. These are the ones that will be actually the ones that make it to the objectives. They're the ones that will do most of the damage. They want to be all at least regular infantry squads. They want to be having a heavy weapon in each squad. They want to be having a special weapon in each squad. Yeah, that's your third line, and that's your second line. And your third line tends to be made up of support elements, any infantry squads that don't fit in the second line, and characters that can issue orders, because you want to be, if possible, taking advantage of Voxcasters these days. Voxcasters, I think, are actually something I'm going to be including in my army a lot, so that I can deny my enemy the assassinate victory point. But that's getting a bit too specific. But they're your typical, your 3 lines of infantry: your screen, your regulars, and your support. Your expendables, your line infantry, and your support elements. Okay, that's how you want to deploy. So that's the first part of deployment. The second part of deployment is you want to. It's almost like if I could use a real world sort of history analogy, you always want to be like Napoleon, and you want to break down to like the core system. So what Napoleon did is he had armies within armies. So he didn't have one big blob of force. He broke down into smaller armies that basically then, if they needed to, could come back together to form one big army. You want to do something similar here. I often say when I'm running my pure infantry guard, I build myself around the platoon, the fluffy platoon structure. There's 2 reasons for that. 1, it's fluffy and cool. 2, it allows me to do the core system, or the army within the army system, armyception. When you're deploying on the battlefield, you want to break the deployment down into thirds, especially in 9th edition, because what you'll find is there is objectives in the middle of the board, typically 2, sometimes 3, but 2 objectives in the middle of the board, and there might be 1 in your deployment zone. Well, what you want to do is to allocate your forces into 3 distinct armies, and each one of those armies will have a distinct function to play on the battlefield. So just for simplicity's sake, let's say you take 3 battalions and you take 60 infantry in each battalion. Okay, 60 line infantry. Okay, then support elements on top of that. You want to look at the typical 9th edition battlefield and be like, okay, I need to take those 2 middle objectives. I need to try and deny my enemy one of his objectives. I need to hold one of mine. Okay, so I'm going to deploy 1 battalion in each third of my deployment zone, every just under 2 feet. Okay, if you're playing in a standard Dawn of War deployment. And you're going to say that platoon, that army, that corps is going to take one of those middle objectives. That corps is going to defend my objective, and the 3rd corps is going to go up the right flank and take another middle objective. This will, out of a 4 objectives, let's say there's 4 objectives in the game, this will allow me to hold my objective and also take 2 middle objectives. And those corps, they stick to their jurisdiction, so to say. There will always be exceptions that prove the rule. You'll sometimes need to help support one side more than the other. Sometimes the enemy will do a refuse flank, and you will need to be able to counter that by putting more men on a certain flank. Point is you break down to 3 distinct units, 3 distinct corps, and you give each corps a mission in your head, in deployment zone, whilst you're going. Okay, and you execute that plan, and you're thinking you've almost got the whole battle planned out before you even roll the first dice. Okay, and you can do that in 9th edition more so than you can do in any previous edition, because the objectives are set, the missions are the same. It's much easier to do. Before, you used to have to do a bit of thinking before the game. Now you can do your whole bit of an exaggeration, but you can almost do your whole plan before even turning up to the tournament, because you know what you're going to do in each mission. You know how you're going to play it. You know how you're going to break your cores down. Some units may get transferred over to one core if the enemy has a stronger flank. If it's an equal across the board, it's easier. But there you go. So that's like the last serious point, which is get used to this, where you're going to deploy, and get used to planning many turns in advance with this Horde army, because that will save you time. Okay, and this brings me on to the last major point. It's kind of like a point 4A, point 4B, I should say, which is biggest problem with running a Horde army in a tournament. It takes a lot of time. Okay, it takes a lot of time. The way you get around that is you have the whole game, if you can, or at least 2 or 3 turns. You plan 2 or 3 turns ahead. Fantastic. And this other thing is you make your army very homogeneous, very standardized. You don't have 2 or 3 squads with a flamer, 1 squad with a melter, 4 squads with a plasma. Those guys have got the only las cannon in the army because of the one time they took down the Tyranid hive tank with it. No. You turn up and you have a standardized loadout. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have only like plasma gun and autocannon, or plasma or melter and las cannon, but you turn up with at most sort of 2, 3 loadouts on your infantry squads, and you have them equally distributed. So if you're taking 18 infantry squads, you can take 6 with just flamer, they're your screens. 6 with autocannon and grenade launcher, they're your take all comers. 6 with your plasma and your las cannons, there you go. But it's easy. It's easy to remember. If it's up to me now, based on the current 9th edition situation, I'd turn up to every game with a heavy bolter and a plasma gun in 18 infantry squads, and I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't even think about any of the loadout. That's what I am working towards myself. So there you go. And that will save you a lot of time, okay? Because you don't need to think about which model goes where in deployment, that you just shove everything down. You know everything's got the same loadout. Veterans, they've all got plasma guns. Easy. Officers, you give them all the same weapon. You don't give one officer a power sword and one officer a power fist. No, they've all got the same weapon, las pistol and chainsword, or they've all got a bolter if you're running, whatever, but they all get the same thing. Infantry squads get very similar loadouts. Your officers all get the same loadout. Your veteran squads all get the same loadout. Your heavy weapon teams all get the same loadout. Make it standardized, make it homogenized, make it quick and easy. That is how you run a pure infantry guard army on the tournament field, okay? Otherwise, you're going to run out of time with that chess clock. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to get destroyed, okay? I've run my pure infantry army under chess clock conditions, and my opponent has run out of time, and I haven't. And he was using an elite army, and I wasn't. I was using a horde, and people were like, "What? What's happened?" My opponent was like, "What? What's happened? How come we still got time left on the clock?" It's like, because I planned this whole thing out in my head, and I have used this army a lot. Practice, that's the last thing I would say on the whole timing thing. And I also have a really easy way to know what unit can do what, because everyone's got the same weapons, basically. Makes it much easier to do. So they're all sort of the main points of running, 101, running a guard pure infantry army. Obviously, there's a lot more you can go into in a lot more detail, and I'm just scraping the surface here, guys. But it's just, the people who watch this video, it's to get the old brain juices thinking. Okay, it's a little bit more than just throw models down, swarm objectives. You want to have your deployment sorted out. You want to have your games practiced. You want to have your units standardized. There's a lot more that goes into it. The last thing I would say, and this is more of a fun, silly point rather than a serious point. And I know some people actually, they don't like it when I talk about this. So, the controversial topic coming up. But you want to do what I call is you want to put the voodoo into the enemy. Now, I have no idea where this expression came from. It's something that me and my brother came up with. If you don't know, my brother has his own YouTube channel, Scholar Progenium. Go and check it out. He covers all the Blood Angel stuff. If you're interested in Marines, go and check him out. But when we were first getting into the tournament scene, we came up with this phrase like putting the voodoo into the enemy. And I think it came from we both loved the film Predator 2. Okay, and there's that scene in Predator 2 when one gang is like has done like a gang raid on another gang, and they like sacrifice them, and it's like, oh, I'm going to do voodoo magic to you, and by doing the voodoo magic, he scares the crap out of the other gang, basically. So that's where it comes from. So when we say putting the voodoo into the enemy, you know, voodoo tactics, what I mean, it's psychological tactics is what I mean. Now, I say this very tongue-in-cheek, it's not too serious, but it is something you kind of want to be aware of, which is if you turn up with a well-painted, well-organised, pure infantry army, and you give off this air of, oh, I know what I'm doing with this, then it does have like a little, it does have a little mindfuck with the enemy. You know, they're like, this guy's not turned up and he's like a, you know, nutty fluff player who doesn't really know what he's doing in a tournament. This guy's turned up and he is ready to play, okay? And he has built and painted all this infantry, and the enemy will just look at it and go, that's a lot of guys. And instinctively they're going to... This obviously will have no impact on really pro veteran tournament players, so don't get me wrong, you know, and it might not have any impact on anyone whatsoever. But the little sort, it's just a little funny, just being like, that's a lot of people. I have never had a game of pure infantry guard at a tournament where my opponent hasn't gone, that's a lot of guys, or wow, that's a lot of guys, or where are the tanks, you know, or without fail, it puts a big smile on my face, because I'm almost like, all right, they're already like going, you know, if you can make your opponent go, then that's a good thing, right? It makes your opponent go, ooh, this is fruity. This is a bit different, you know. And for some people, it can be like really intimidating, and you can really play on it. And like I said, this is very tongue-in-cheek, guys. Don't take it too seriously. But you can sort of play on it a little bit, and you can be like, you know, if the enemy like kills 60 guard in the first turn, and or kills 40 guard in the first turn, you can be like, yes, acceptable losses, and you say it with a joke, and you smile at your opponent. You don't like come across as a dick. But the point is, your opponent has a bit of laugh, and you are having a bit of laugh with your opponent, but at the same time, your opponent's like, oh, it's just acceptable losses. Oh dear, and you can say, well, you know. Hope you can do that every turn for the next 5 turns, because you'll kill 200 guys. I'll still have 50 left over in my 250 man pure infantry army. And your opponent goes, oh, what? You know, when you think about it like that, it is pretty crazy. But you don't say that to your opponent, obviously. You just sort of, you just make a little joke about it. Oh yeah, drop in the ocean. Acceptable casualties. There's always more where they came from. For every one of you kill, there's 10 more that take their place. And, you know, you play up to it a little bit, and maybe you'll psych your opponent out. Probably not. But what you will do is you'll have a bit of a laugh. And tournaments are very competitive places, but it's also very important to remember that everyone's there is, you know, to win, but also to have fun. And if you can have a bit of a laugh with your opponent along the way, and you can sort of play up to the fact that you're playing pure infantry. And obviously you take the game seriously, but you don't take yourself too seriously, because you have turned up with a bit of a meme army, but, you know, a good meme army. And it's always a lot of fun to play up to that. And I think you should play up to that. And it will, you know, it'll be a little bit intimidating for some, you know, players, but not overly so. And it'll be also a great way to sort of break the ice, which is something you definitely want to consider when you're going to tournament. You're playing strangers for the first time. You've got to try and build a rapport with that guy over the table. You know, building that rapport with, you know, by joking a little bit about the army, getting into it, role playing a little bit, theming it a little bit. It's great. Your opponent will love it. I've never had anyone who's ever reacted negatively to me going full commissar mode and just being like, ha, cowards deserve to die, or first into the breach, and, you know, glory to the first man to die, and, you know, saying these little Dawn, because everyone's played a bit of Dawn of War, you crack a few Dawn of War quotes out, they'll be like, oh, is that Dawn of War? You're like, yeah, that's what the commissar says. So it's a last intervention. It's not so much a tactical thing. It's not so much like, you know, voodooing or scaring the enemy. It's almost like play up to it a little bit. You know, play up to a little bit. Have a bit of fun. Like I said, it's tongue-in-cheek. You don't really want to be like intimidating the enemy. You don't really want to be doing that. It's a bit of fun, but, you know. And my point is that you know, you can play up to it a little bit, and it is, and that's what you should do. It is a bit of fun. So there you go, guys. I hope you putting the voodoo into people is very much a jokey tactic. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. But I hope but sometimes it works. Sometimes it does. But you don't want to actually scare. You don't want to actually scare the enemy. You don't actually want to voodoo curse them or anything like that. Anyway, guys, that's it, guys. That's a brief overall overview of Pure Infantry. You want to, before you even get into it, you want to make sure it's what you want to do, because it's going to take you a while to build it up. When you're in there, make life easy for yourself, plan things out first, get used to it, and when you're on the battlefield, play up to it, guys. You are if you do go for it, you are collecting a really unique army. Play up to it. Do the whole sort of like, acceptable casualties, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please leave lots of comments down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know your Pure Infantry Guard experiences. Has it worked for you? Has it not? It works for me in my local meta. Maybe it doesn't work everywhere. What would be really cool is to put down there what you think is a really strong counter to Guard Pure Infantry, and what can we do as Guard players to try and counter the counter. And then I'll look at those comments and I'll read them and I'll put them into a video, and we can do a little tactics things from it. We can, as a Guard community, we can build that video together, maybe that video series together. Anyway, guys, hope you have enjoyed this video. Please leave lots of comments below, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.